Hi, welcome to another edition of our Etnyre International videos. I'm Brian Horner, and today we're just going to do a general parts description of the circulating system. A lot of times when we're talking to customers over the phone, they call something a little different than we call it, or we ask them to go look at something. We just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So just a quick little video to identify what's at the back end of the distributor. First off, I'm going to use my little orange pointer here. This is the fill line. So this line is where we hook up to suck material into our tank. So this is what we call in or fill line. The pipe closest to the tank is our discharge line. Okay, that's the pipe where if we wanted to pump off of our tank into another unit, we would use this pipe. So just remember that the one closest to the tank is out and the one closest to the rear bumper is in. The valve that we talk about a lot in today's world that's very difficult to see is back up underneath. There's a valve under here. That valve is a butterfly valve that we call a power return. What that really is a butterfly valve in the return pipe back to the tank. So that valve needs to be open all the time to be able to circulate oil. But the only time it really closes is when we don't want any oil back to the tank, such as discharging, transferring, hand spraying, or while we're spraying. Then the air cylinder on that valve would close it. There is a mark that you'll see in the video on that valve that shows a line on the valve. So if it's in the vertical position, that means that valve is open. And if the air cylinder rotates it, the horizontal, or the line will go horizontal, which means that valve is closed. So if we ever ask you to look at the power return valve, the valve up underneath behind the suction valve right at the bottom of the tank is the valve that we're referencing. So as we move around the other side of the truck, I'll switch places with Andrew here. So on your fill pipe you have a little ball valve. This is our diesel valve. So with this valve, you always want it closed for anything except when we want to put diesel into our circulating system. If you leave this valve open, now either with our wash pump or when our asphalt pump is turning, it will suck diesel fuel from our auxiliary tank into this pipe, which then ends up into the suction box, which ends up into the asphalt pump and rinses it out. But please always make sure you close that during normal operation, because asphalt does get into this pipe and it can force itself back down into your plumbing and it will plug your hoses up. So the reason for two hoses, one comes from the tank, brings diesel fuel in, the other one goes to the port on the rear bumper for your wash down wand. You don't need to open this valve to use your wash down wand. All you need to do is open this when you want diesel fuel into this pipe. Other than that, leave it closed. We have a couple valves here, which are our hand spray valves. So in normal operation, they're always pressed against the tank, closest to the tank. If you were gonna hand spray, if you bring the top one around, then we're in the hand spray mode. And if you want to suck the hand spray gun back, it's simply split the two, and now it puts suction on there to allow your hand spray hose to be cleaned out. But for normal operation, just make sure that you leave those always in this position. The other thing that we talk about a lot is our suction, excuse me, our suction box. So we refer to this whole thing as a suction box. Okay, so that's where the oil comes out of the tank into this box and floods our pump. Our asphalt pump is located down below this. One of the things we get confused a lot about is a lot of us will call this a suction valve, but in simple terms, let's just call it a tank valve. Okay, all this is, there's a big air cylinder in here with a plate that goes against the tank, and it closes off the tank when it's closed so no oil can get into our system. And when we go to a function that we want oil, like circulating tank or circulating bar, hand spray, anything where we need oil into our pump, the tank valve or suction valve then opens, so it slides that plate back and allows asphalt from our tank to get into our system and down to our pump. Now you can see if that valve is open or closed through the sight gauge. So right now you don't see anything in that sight tube because this is closed, okay? If I was to power it up and open it, you would see the shaft of that air cylinder back against this glass. So then you would know that that valve is open. So we're gonna call this the suction valve or the tank valve. Then directly below that is our asphalt pump. So the asphalt pump is down here, okay? And then our asphalt pump is directly coupled to a gearbox. We've used different gearboxes over the years, but they all take some gear oil in them to make sure that they're lubricated. And then attached to the gearbox is our hydraulic motor. And then over the years, different motors have different sensors to be able to count the speed of that motor. That's what's telling our computer how many revolutions our pump is making, and that's what our computer runs off of, is that feedback. So again, an asphalt pump, our gearbox, and then a hydraulic motor. And what will be hard for Andrew to get a picture of is down below the asphalt pump. We call that the four-way valve. If I can get my pointer in here. There are a couple nuts on the shaft. There's packing behind that. So if that starts to leak, you can tighten those nuts up a little bit and be able to stop that leak, or maybe it will need to be repacked. And Andrew, I don't know if you can get over here and look straight down at this keyway, or if you can see the end of my pointer. And I apologize for this video sort of walking around here, but it's hard to see everything. So on that shaft of that four-way valve, you can see this coupling, and you can see this set screw in there. That's the keyway. And that set screw holds the keyway in place to be able to put the rotary actuators onto that shaft. So then you have two rotary actuators. One moves when we want to go from circulate in tank to circulate in bar, and the other one then moves when we go from circulate in bar to spray. Okay, now going back to that keyway, I think he's got a good picture of it. The sun's shining on it a little bit. That is what we'll ask you to check for the timing of our four-way valve. That always stays at 12 o'clock, which is straight up noon. For anything you want to do to this truck except circulate in bar, when I went to circulate in bar, that will rotate to 9 o'clock and point straight out to the driver's side. And if I hit my master spray switch, it will rotate to 6 o'clock or point straight at the ground. That's the only three positions to that valve. So if we ever ask you to say, hey, we need to check the timing of your four-way valve, we're going to ask you to look for that keyway or that set screw is what we're referring to. Okay? So then I'll move around over here. This one has a heated asphalt pump on, so these lines are actually antifreeze that's coming from our truck engine to warm that pump up. And then on the end of our suction box, if we ask you to check your strainer, okay, this is in this big box. There's a big strainer in there to catch any debris that's in our asphalt oil before it gets to our pump. That's where you would loosen the bolts on these strong arms, slide them off, then this plate would come off and you can pull that strainer directly out. Now, a quick little thing, and Andrew, you stay right there. If you want to see if that strainer's plugged without pulling it, you can actually take the cap off your fill line, make sure everything's shut off so our tank valve's closed and we don't get any oil, we don't want anybody to get wet. Take your cap off, shine a flashlight down this big pipe, and you can see that strainer in here. So you'll be able to check that without ever pulling it. So if you shine a flashlight down this pipe and you don't see a bunch of holes and strainer mesh in there, then you need to clean that strainer. So that's when you would take off your cover and be able to pull that strainer out and clean it. This was probably a good side to show the rotary actuators again. Like I said, the keyway on the four-way valve shaft is important. Then one actuator moves when we go from circulate in tank to circulate in bar, and then the other actuator moves when we go from circulate in bar to circulate in tank. So if you want to pan out just a little bit, Andrew will show them the burners. This unit's equipped with diesel burners. These are Wayne burners. We've used Beckett's at some point years ago also. We've had some updates to wiring and stuff on these burners, but these are the latest and greatest diesel burners that we offer. So then if you can get a picture of the bar quick, Andrew, just step back. If we ever ask about an end cap on the spray bar, we're talking about this square cap, okay? Spray bar nozzles are the brass, spray bar valves are the cast part. Flip levers are these little flip levers that we use in order to engage the valve. Of course, air bar cylinders. The other thing is the breakaway bolt. So if I fold a wing down, there's this bolt right here, and that breaks if you hit something. So we want just a soft grade 2 1/4-inch bolt in here. Don't ever put a hardened bolt in, because then if you would hit something with your wing, that can't shear off and then you end up bending all this piping up. So we want to make sure a soft grade 2 bolt. And then just simple stuff like hydraulic cylinders to raise and lower your wings on both sides. You have a bar latch system up here, so air operated. You want to adjust your stops on both ends so you're at your point of where you want your bar to be as your bottom stops. Your top stops at the other end allow us to bring the bar up so this swings under here clearly and be able to latch your bar. I would always suggest that if you're going to travel any distance at all, always lock your bar into place, because that will take a lot of stress off of your hydraulic cylinders and your feed tubes. If you want to swing around to the back, Andrew, most of our trucks are equipped with a soaking box, we call it, which is nothing more than a box with a drain in the bottom that we can fill full of diesel fuel or release agent number 2 to be able to put extra parts and stuff. Just basically a place to wash some parts up while you're driving down the road. Always latch it in place so it doesn't leak. At the very back you have a quick couple or air chuck, but that's actually not air, that's for our diesel washdown wand. So that's what that is for. The fact of our feed tubes, I wanted to show you a couple things about those. So when the oil comes through the pump and the 4-way valve, it actually goes down to the bar through these big square pipes and then out these feed tubes to be able to fill the bar. The feed tubes have swivel balls on the front and the back. That's what's under these little covers, okay? There's O-rings in here that can leak in time or get cut. The covers are there to protect the ball so that we don't get any debris, rocks, or anything on there that can get in there and cut that O-ring. So always make sure you maintain these swivel ball covers. And then there's a whole procedure for taking this apart we won't go into. But then there's a lock nut here, a flange nut we call it. It's got a set screw on it also. There's nothing more than a brass washer behind this. There's not a gasket. So to put those back on, you want to tighten them as tight as you can, and then make sure you tighten the set screws so no vibration going down the road can loosen those and things start to leak there. The other thing that's at the back, if you have a heated pump, sump, and drops, that's where this tube comes in. This is actually antifreeze warming up everything back here. And then there is a drain plug on each side. So if we ever have to drain the entire system, we can pull this drain tube and get all the asphalt out of our system. The reason this is important is when we're sucking back, our suck back tubes that draw all the material back out of our bar actually go down to this lowest point on the unit. So we want to make sure that we keep this clear, and sometimes at the end of the season or whatever, a good thing to do is make sure you pull these plugs out and get all that old material so it doesn't get hard in there and plug up our suck back tube. So it's just a simple pipe plug that you can pull out and be able to get to that. And that really just gives you an overview of the parts that are on the back of the distributor and what we call them. So with that, we'll end this video and we'll get set up for a couple more.